reason was using that because if you're wearing white, all you'll see is this powder on your clothes. And so not only did I have to paint myself, but I also had to wipe it. And so for me, that physical glow, or that source of that physical glow, was only temporary. But I was thinking, imagine if I had this natural glow that would stand the test of time. And so the big idea this morning is this: to truly glow, and when I refer to glow, God's light and love, outwardly witness, a reliable source is essential. Let me highlight a couple of things about light. Light is made up of energy. Second point is that light travels in a straight line, and that objects in its path cause light to bend or refract. Third one is this: the speed of light is exactly, and if we sort of narrow it down, 300,000 kilometers, check this out, per second. That's crazy. And when we look at how it travels, light travels at the speed that you could go around the earth 7.5 times, check this out, in a second. In a second. And so what I wanted to share is that light sources can be natural or humanly constructed. And so when we look at the sun, it's a natural source of light. It's an important part. And we will come back because Jesus uses that as a metaphor. But at the same time, it can be humanly constructed. And thank you to, what's his name? Thomas Edison. You know, somebody said it took about 1,000 fails. Others said it was 10,000. But it was actually something around 2,774 times that he failed before he had a product. But the light source, it can be natural or it can be humanly constructed. So I want to ask the question this morning: what is the source of your glow? Is it something that is naturally energizing you, or is it something that you are trying to construct or manufacture? Light is so important that we have this thing that it gives out, natural sunlight gives out this lux, 100,000. But modern living only gives us around 500. But we need at least, I think it was about 10,000 lux per day. And when we expose ourselves to that natural sunlight, it does something to our well-being. And what it means is that we need to stand outside in the sunlight for at least half an hour. How many of us are stuck indoors, even though the sun is shining, but we choose to stay? And you know what? Just try it. When you have days like this, even though it may be a bit chilly, go outside. I'm not saying that you sunbake for an hour or 2 hours. Just go for a walk or stand in that natural light for half an hour, and then come back and then say, man, how did that make you feel? And so this natural sunlight has a huge positive blessing for us as human beings. And so I wanted to highlight, because Jesus in the Gospel of John, or John, uses these claims. And the claims is that I am. There's 7 in total. But it's in reference to when God describes himself to Moses. And Moses is coming to him. You find this in not in the Gospel, but in the book of Exodus, where Moses is standing in front of a burning bush. And there's this conversation between God and Moses. And God's telling Moses what he wanted him to do. And Moses was freaking out because, but who do I say? Because the mission was to go back, because God could hear the cries of his people. And he says, Moses, I want you to go back and bring out my people. And then he says, but who should I say has sent me. And then God says, just say that I am has sent you. And so God uses that statement that I am to describe who he is. And the gospel writer John uses it. Jesus actually uses it. But John captures it. And so I wanted to highlight there we find that Jesus says, I am the bread of life, I am the door, I am the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and life, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I am the true vine. The point that is missing is Jesus says, I am the light. And so our key text for this morning is found in John chapter 8 verse 12. And Jesus is saying, I am the light of the world. And if you follow me, you will not walk in what? Darkness. You will not walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. You know, it got me thinking. And it got me thinking, if the sun, moon, and stars, and we're talking about the natural light, were created on day 4, what and where did the source of light come from? And so, you know, we kind of like reflected and said, what do these people say? Some people say, well, the sun was begun, but it was not completed. Secondly, some have said it was created on the first day, but didn't appear until the 4th day. Another said another light source was created before the sun. Somebody says, well, you know what? There's this black hole. Light actually came from that empty space. Somebody says, well, you know, when God created the heaven and the earth, when we read it, we're just misunderstanding the text. And I'm thinking, well, who is right? But when I read in certain passages, and when particularly in the book of Revelation 22 verse 5, and here it says, and there will be no night there, no need for lamps or sun, for the who, everyone? For the Lord God will shine on them, and they will reign forever and ever. And let everyone say, Amen. So could it be that the light that was present came from God himself? The big idea to truly glow, a reliable source is essential. So when we look at that key text, John chapter 8, verse 12, I want you to understand what was happening at the time. It was during the time of the Feast of Tabernacles. And what they normally do is it's kind of like an 8-day feast, from Sabbath to Sabbath, 8 days. And what they would do, it was to celebrate the fact that God had led them out of Egypt into the wilderness. And while they were in the wilderness, they would construct these huts, these temporary tents, in which they were dwelling in for 40 years and 40 nights, while they were wandering around. And so, during this festival, those who would travel far and near will come to Jerusalem, and they, even though you may have a house, you would then, during this time, go out, set up your tent, and the whole family will be living in that tent for 8 days. It's kind of like a big camp. But not only would they live in these temporary dwellings and they would eat together, do life for those 8 days, but there is also something that happens at night, because we're reminded when God led the children of Israel through the wilderness, through the day it was a cloud, but through the night it was what? A pillar of fire. And so what they would do is that they would have all these lamps, these lights. And if you were standing on a hill looking over at Jerusalem, it will be something similar to this. In the center of Jerusalem, you have these main pillar of lights that sort of beam out to the rest of the community. For 8 days, they will light up each night. This will be something bigger and better than what you would see on the 1st of January or New Year's Eve. And so I want you to reflect on these words. When Jesus stepped out, it was day 9 when he said these words. I am the light of the world. It's kind of like some of us here, whether you believe in the tradition of Christmas or not, but there are some that would like to put up Christmas tree or decorations. There's a time for family to come together. And what had happened was that, and I remember one time when the decorations went up, 25th of December came, 26th, New Year's, into February, and our Christmas decorations were still up. And you go, we should take them down. But I want you to understand, when Jesus stepped into day 9 after this festival, where every night was lit up, he's kind of like standing on that morning, the day after, and he says these words, I am the light of the world. That even though that these lights have gone out, I am a light that will never go out. I remember when we were living in Tasmania, and I had 3 churches at the time, but one was about an hour from where we lived, and we had a prayer meeting. And so the family didn't want to join me, so I decided, I'll go by myself. And it was on a Wednesday, I was driving out, but the roads were quite windy. It was dark, it wasn't quite lit. The further I sort of journeyed away from Launceston, heading towards Scottsdale, it got very, very dark. And one thing that you had to be careful is that because there were kangaroos and stuff, you got to be careful because they just come in front of you. So you had to, but on this time, as I was driving back of a prayer meeting, and I had some music on at the time, but there was an extra noise that was happening, and the car did not feel right, to the point where I had to pull over and realize that I had a flat tire. Now, we have people here who are very, very capable of changing tires. But for me, I have a speed dial number. It's RACT, Tasmania. And then we'll come and fix it. But because I was out of phone range, I was thinking, how am I going to do this? But luckily we had the lights blinkering. It gave me enough to go to the back and to grab the spare tire. I sort of had a fair idea. Now, I could have went to YouTube, but because I had no Wi-Fi connection, I just thought, okay, this is how you do it. But it was still pretty dark. And I was thinking, I need some extra light. And I just remembered that I had a torch that was inside my car. And I went to grab the torch, and I turned it on again. Oh, it's not working. Oh, that's right. I've got some batteries. And so I got these batteries, and there are different types of batteries out there. I got these batteries ever ready. And I had 3 of them in my car. I grabbed them, opened the torch, put them in, and then I turned the torch on, only to find that ever ready was not ready. It was flat. And I'm thinking, for me, in my time of frustration, I was thinking, I need lights. How many of us have been in that situation when you needed something to happen, but it failed you? And so what I wanted to say, when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, he is basically saying, I am a light that you can rely on, that will never go out. And so he continues on to say that if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness. And so I want to highlight this morning that Jesus is the light that will guide us through the darkness. That will guide us through the darkness. And I remember a time when I was in Pathfinders, and we would often go camping on the weekends. Some of my great memories is coming through Pathfinders. It's kind of like, for those who don't know, it's equivalent to Scouts, and they often do camping and stuff. And on Saturday night, we'll often play something called Capture the Flag. I'm sure that was a game at the time. It was a pitch. You had 2 teams. One The flag was hidden and the other team hid it, but the other team had to find it. Now, where we had this camp, it was pretty much on a farm. Okay? It was a massive area. It was on a farm, you know, and the owner had some cattle, some horses, some sheep. And so I remember we were running after looking for this flag, but I kind of like stepped into something. They went, and I went, ah. So not only did I feel it, but I also smelt it, only to find that what I stepped into was, yeah, this stuff. It wasn't very pleasing. And I guess what I wanted to highlight is that it was hard for me to see at light. I didn't have a torch at the time. But Jesus, being the light, that He will shine on paths so that we don't get stuck in this type of situation. So Jesus says, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you will not walk in darkness. But then He brings it home that you, because you will have the light that leads to life. The last point for this morning is that Jesus is light that would lead us to the finish line. Jesus is light that would lead us to the finish line. I remember a story about a young woman, a young lady in high school called Clara. And Clara was part of a school where they didn't have many resources. It was kind of like in a rural area, so they didn't have much. But one thing she was passionate about is that she was passionate about athletics. You know, athletics. And so she would train hard, and there was a special event. And because of that event, if you get chosen, you go on to the next level, nationals. But this was a very important school, in fact, and she wanted to go to the national level. And so every day she would eat properly, she would train, she had a personal coach that will come and see her twice a week so that she can train really hard. And it was when she went for a run, she accidentally twisted her ankle. And it wasn't just a little twist, it was a really bad twist. There was still time for her to recover, but as the event started to draw closer, she realized she may not be ready for this. But she was still determined. She was a determined young lady. And so on that day, when she was ready to take her position, on your mark, get set, and she started to run. And when she ran, she started to slow down. Everyone else had taken off in front of her, but she slowed down, and everyone was thinking, oh, I think she just wanted to still run to participate. Because everyone knew how passionate Clara was in participating, but also doing very well in this event. But Clara had other plans. She says, no, I'm determined. And so she started to pick up her game, and she started to run and run and run. She started to pass the last person, second to last, and she was starting to, get close, but not close enough. Others were running ahead, and in her mind, when the more she pushed herself, the more she realized, I just need to give up. But one of the instructions that her coach gave her while training, she says, Clara, I want you to focus at the light at the end of the tunnel. And that light will guide you to the finish line. This guy wasn't a Christian. He was just using this as a metaphor. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Find that light. It will guide you to the finish line. Eventually, Clara, she finished the race. She pushed through the barrier, and she came second in the event. And what got her through was reflecting on the words of her coach. Focus at the light, on the light at the end of the tunnel. It will guide you to the finish line. And that, as she was running, just keep playing and playing on her mind. You know, friends, Jesus is the light. Not only the light of Maroochydore or Australia or this continent, but He is the light of the world. A light that will help us to see through the darkness, but also the light that will lead you and I to the finish line. To truly glow, we need a reliable source. But is that source of your glow, is it something that you are constructing? Is it something that you try to, maybe if you just, if you knew all the 28 fundamentals, you can tick that box. If only you would come to every Sabbath school, sit in the pews, if only you were able to serve more or to give more, then that would be the source of my glow. But the problem with that is that is not sustainable. That is not sustainable. What we need is a reliable source, something outside of us, and you know what that source is. And that source is Jesus Christ. He is the light that will never go out. He will not leave you nor abandon you. He is the light that will guide you through the darkness, even through the tough seasons of your life. He is a light that even though at times you may struggle, maybe you find a lack of seeing no peace or no purpose or no meaning. Maybe you're going through that phase in your life. But Jesus says, you stick with me and I will lead you to the finish line. As I invite the singers to come up as we sing our last song, I want you to really think about, are you trying to do something? Or are we going to allow God to make Him the source so that I'm not trying to perform, but I'm focusing on allowing the light to come into my life so that He can transform me and you from the inside out. I invite you to stand as we sing this last song together.
The joy in my song, by day and by night, He lives. He is my salvation from sorrow and sin. This blessed persuasion, the Spirit